Hello everyone, our topic this week was requested by Blazing Tiger 5000. We'll be going over Ferelden for the Dragon Age franchise. Spoilers for all things Dragon Age.
Okay, so Ferelden is a country in Dragon Age's continent of Thedas. It was the country in which the first game, Dragon Age Origins, takes place, and is featured in varying degrees of prominence ever since. One of the interesting things about that is that by comparison to other countries, including the others on which we've made videos, Ferelden is young, having been officially founded around 388 years before the first game begins, making it about 402 years old by the time the most recent game ends. Its relative youth and perceived barbarity has led to members of other nations to look down upon Ferelden and its people as a matter of course, particularly Orlesian, see our video on them here. Despite the country's relative recent founding, the history of its people traces back nearly 3,000 years.
Nearly 4,000 years before the time of the games, humanity landed on Thedas, the continent on which the Dragon Age games take place. They landed far up north around the area where the nation of Tevinter would eventually be founded, see our video here. But these early barbarian tribes soon spread across the continent, and a little less than 3 separate tribes of Alamari barbarians settled in deep in the southeastern corner of the continent and named their new home Ferelden, which means Fertile Valley in the old Alamari tongue. Over time, the 3 tribes would split to occupy the mountains to the west, the swamplands to the south, and the valley proper that makes up Ferelden as we think of it today. The mountain people would become the Avar, the swamplanders would become the Chastened, and those who lived in the valley itself would become the modern-day Fereldens.
Ferelden culture has always been a culture based around individual freedoms and achievement. It would be inaccurate to say that it has ever been a full meritocracy, but true to the nation's barbarous roots, with the correct skills, know-how, and luck, the lowliest member of society can rise to incredible heights. Both in the days of yore and now, it's always been possible to come from nothing and make a name for yourself. In fact, Ferelden's first king did just that. But despite the fact that Fereldens also hold honor and loyalty in high regard, that also means that Fereldens are constantly jockeying for a better position. With most of Ferelden's pre-unification history being filled with near constant infighting between one tribe, lord, family, or another, uniting only temporarily or when a large threat came their way. 2 noted examples of this unification are related to one of Ferelden's more unique characteristics: the culture's love and admiration of dogs. It has been said that there aren't really more dogs in Ferelden than you'll find in any other country. The difference is in how much the Fereldens love and respect their canine companions. There are 2 events that are primarily pointed to as possible starting points for the country's canine preoccupation. The first is that Ferelden has always had something of a werewolf problem. It even got so bad that one particular Ferelden hero, himself rumored to have been a werewolf, declared war on lycanthropes and crusaded around the countryside, stamping them out, reducing their numbers to something more manageable. During this time, the belief came to light that dogs could detect werewolves even when they walked around as common men and women, and so dogs were employed everywhere as literal guard dogs, possibly leading to the popularity and ubiquity of dogs Ferelden over that we see today. Another tale tells of an invasion from Tevinter during which they brought the Mabari, a breed of dog magically imbued with enhanced intelligence and vigor that eventually defected to the Ferelden's side. So, when Tevinter's forces were rebuffed, the Mabari stayed, becoming beloved allies and companions. Modern Ferelden armies even have full Mabari detachments, not unlike an average army would have cavalry units and the like. These stories, both with kernels of truth, combined with years of the dogs being around, have led to dogs and dog motifs being ever present in Ferelden society.
Turning back to Ferelden's appreciation for personal freedom, loyalty, and honor, the man who would become Ferelden's first king was a man who embodied all of these traits, while also showcasing the fragility of adhering to any of these ideals to the exclusion of others. Calenhad Theron was born to a simple merchant and became the squire of a more affluent relative. During the young Calenhad's life, the most recent series of wars to establish a king over the whole land was raging fiercely. Many such wars had come beforehand, with no one ever succeeding to unite the entire country under their banner. Until the arrival of Calenhad. The eventual king's legend first began when one of his lord's enemies offered parley after a long siege. Calenhad's master sent him in his place, with orders to pose as the lord himself. When he arrived, though, Calenhad instead revealed his true identity, impressing his enemy, who admitted he'd planned to kill Calenhad's master during the parley and offered Calenhad a place with him. Calenhad refused, noting that neither noble had real honor, and was then allowed to return to his master's service. By the end of the siege, Calenhad's lord had been slain, but their enemies were defeated, with their leader, the one from the parley, defeated by Calenhad's own hand in single combat. the lord was spared, and impressed by the man's honor and skill, this enemy lord swore fealty to Calenhad, who became the new lord of those lands after his master's death and married the master's daughter, cementing his status as a true noble. In the years that followed, Calenhad would defeat or rally all of Ferelden until he finally conquered the last city and called a landsmeet to declare himself king. It is said that all who attended bowed to Calenhad Theron as their first king without question or dissent, and thus modern Ferelden was born.
The landsmeet is a perfect example of how Ferelden's government works, which is presented as being relatively or wholly unique in Thedas. Whereas many countries have some kind of absolute ruler, a standard emperor or king to whom all bow, with power starting at the top filtering down, Fereldans like to say that the power of their nation is rooted in the ground and grows up from there. Ferelden's king or queen isn't technically much more than the most powerful noble in the land. Effectively, that makes them virtually indistinguishable from most monarchies. The primary difference is that there are laws and customs dating back to Ferelden's founding that allow for a monarch's rulership to be challenged, dethroned, and replaced. Assuming, of course, that they aren't some form of charismatic or cunning tyrant that can keep that from happening, like a normal monarch.
Regardless, in simplest terms, the way all of that works is that Ferelden's social ladder is broken up like this. At the bottom you have your average peasantry, unskilled laborers and such. Just above them you have landowners. Any person, from the wealthiest merchant to the lowliest farmer, sits in this second tier so long as they legally own whatever land they claim. These landowners then pay taxes to local lords, who in turn provide protection for the landowners within their reach, who then in turn pay similar taxes up the next level of the societal food chain, which continues until you hit the king or queen. Which noble a landowner pledges allegiance to can change, just as the alliances between the levels of nobility can change. Allegiance to the crown functions in like manner most visibly during the landsmeet, a function generally held once a year, since long before the official founding of Ferelden, when all of the most powerful chiefs, or in modern times the nobles, gather to discuss issues affecting Ferelden as a whole, enacting laws, setting down policies, making or breaking alliances, and the like. The landsmeet also has the power to dethrone and crown their rulers, and so this is often a time for the reigning king or queen to schmooze with the nobles.
Life proceeded largely uneventfully for Ferelden for more than a century after Calenhad was crowned their first king. The line of Theron stretching unbroken as the rulers of the country until the time of the Games. The first major event occurred a little over 150 years after the country was founded, dubbed the Warden Rebellion. The Grey Wardens are an order of warriors dedicated to combating the Darkspawn and the Blights. Darkspawn are creatures twisted by powers unknown into horrible mockeries of what they once were, seemingly unified in their pursuit of the destruction of all other creatures. Blights are events when hordes of Darkspawn lay siege to the world, led by a virtually invincible creature known as an archdemon. For more information on the Wardens, Darkspawn, and Blights, check out our videos on all of them here. As part of their mission, the Grey Wardens have a strict policy of political neutrality, allowing them to be stationed everywhere so they can quickly discover the emergence of a blight. But in this particular instance, the Ferelden branch of the Wardens found themselves drawn into Ferelden's politics.
After the death of the previous ruler, the landsmeet was split between two equally viable successors. When the king was chosen, he had his opponent thrown in prison and only allowed her to live because of tremendous pressure from her supporters. In order to have her political status revoked, she was sent to join the Wardens, who, as a rule, virtually give up their former lives. However, the chosen king turned out to be a horrible tyrant, so terrible in fact that many of the nobility approached the failed candidate, who had by then risen to be the leader of Ferelden's Wardens, asking her to stage a coup and take her place on the throne instead. Eventually, she attempted to do so. However, she lost the battle, and as a result, the tyrannical king banished the Wardens from Ferelden, a banishment that would hold till the beginning of the Games some 200 years later.
The next major event for Ferelden came when, after a 20-year-long war, the country was successfully conquered by Orlais. This was not the first attack by Orlais or others that Ferelden had received, but it was the first to succeed. Ferelden's king survived and lived in hiding, trying unsuccessfully to oust their Orlesian conquerors, but he'd lost the faith of the people, earning the epithet the Defeated while he was still alive. His daughter, though, took over after him and had everything her father had lacked: charisma, daring, and military acumen, earning her the title the Rebel Queen, despite never being officially coronated. Despite her successes in being beloved by the people, the queen was betrayed to the Orlesians by supposed allies and slain, her head put on a pike in front of the palace. Her son, Merrick, took over the fight after her death, and alongside his right-hand man, a former peasant and also gifted strategist named Loghain, Merrick successfully finished what his mother and grandfather had started. killing the nobles who betrayed his mother, killing the Orlesian puppet king in single combat, and after nearly 60 years of occupation, thrusting the Orlesians from the country and officially being crowned king, with his good friend Loghain being raised to the highest seat of nobility possible. Peace did not officially settle with Orlais until around 20 years later, with the rise of Orlais's new ruler, who was eager to make a fresh start with Orlais's neighbors.
About 10 years after peace was made with Orlais, only 30 years after Ferelden had won its independence once more, the next disaster struck Ferelden. By this time, Merrick had vanished, with his son Cailan ruling in his place, who wed to Loghain's daughter Anora. A blight struck Ferelden. Luckily, they caught on early, and on paper, Cailan and Anora made all of the right decisions. In a perfect world, the blight would have been routed quickly, with little damage suffered by the Ferelden people. But if Dragon Age is anything, it's an imperfect world. Seeing the looming threat of the Darkspawn, Cailan allowed the Grey Wardens back into Ferelden. Many disapproved of this move, citing the ancient Grey Warden Rebellion, and considering the nearest garrison of Grey Wardens was Orlesian, that didn't help anything. Additionally, concerned with the safety of his people and the world, and most definitely filled with the idealistic view of a full Thetis united against the Blight, Cailan began secret correspondence with the Empress of Orlais, negotiating Orlesian aid against the Blight. Loghain, the most gifted and decorated general in Ferelden, the king's father-in-law and right-hand man, as he'd been to Cailan's father, was privy to all of this information, and his patriotism for Ferelden was matched only by his hatred for Orlais. What's more, Loghain, like many, didn't believe this was a true blight. The last one had happened centuries ago, a longer gap than between any blights in history, and small armies of Darkspawn were rare, but not unheard of. Loghain could only see Orlais trying to invade Ferelden once more, with his son-in-law the king seemingly opening the doors wide open for them. So, when the king's forces engaged the Darkspawn, Loghain turned with his army and left them to die, certain he was doing the best thing for Ferelden by doing so. This act lost Ferelden thousands of men, all but 2 of the Grey Wardens, their king, and sparked a civil war, all while a true blight flooded the countryside.
Loghain installed himself as regent of Ferelden, effectively claiming power to act on his daughter, the queen's behalf, and demanded the loyalty of the Ferelden people. Freedom being such a big part of their culture, and with a full generation, maybe 2, of countrymen who could remember an enemy occupation in their lifetime, these demands did not sit well with the Fereldens. Some flocked to Loghain's side, others fought him both politically and on the battlefield. While this happened, the Darkspawn raged all but unchecked throughout the country, destroying lands that had been weakened by infighting or were left unprotected as forces were moved to support allies and defeat enemies. Orlesian and Warden support to combat the Blight were turned away at the border. The only saving grace were those 2 Grey Wardens who survived Loghain's treachery, the protagonist of Dragon Age Origins, and Alistair, a Warden and bastard half-brother to Cailan. The 2 Wardens amassed an army and then called a landsmeet, challenging Loghain's claim to the throne. The player then chooses who will rule Ferelden, Alistair, Anora, or both wed together. The player also chooses what becomes of Loghain. But either way, all forces are rallied and the Darkspawn and the Archdemon are defeated, leaving Ferelden to pick itself up and start rebuilding after being absolutely ravaged by the Blight. Disaster strikes Ferelden one final time 10 years later when the Mage and Templar organizations attached to the Chantry go to civil war. Ferelden offered the Mages sanctuary in their lands, which drew the Templars into their country as enemy combatants, both sides tearing up the countryside with their battles. Things came to a head when the Mages forcibly take over one of Ferelden's towns, after which the Mages are kicked out of the country because, duh, allowing Ferelden's people to take a back seat in the larger ongoing war that would follow.
And that's basically Ferelden, the first country we see in the Dragon Age verse. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see in the future, do like Blazing Tiger 5000 and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos, hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like to see our Let's Plays, follow the link in the description and subscribe to our Let's Play channel.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off.